Hi, everyone. Thank y'all for joining our eMobility Microgrants information session. I am going to go ahead and kick it off because we have a lot to cover in the next hour, and I want to make sure everyone has enough time for questions. And we will be sending out this presentation along with all of the links and resources after the information session, so you'll be able to access everything that you see on the slides here today, as well as all the links and images that are a part of that. So kicking it off just with a little bit of background on Evolve for those of you who don't know or need a refresher, but we were founded from the Climate Action Plan in 2019 to improve Houston's air quality and enable EV adoption in the greater Houston area. And our vision is to make clean transportation and clean air a reality for all of Houston. And our goal is to reach 50% of new car sales to be electric by 2030, or hashtag 50 by 30 if you want to talk about it on social media. Our founding members are the City of Houston, Centerpoint Energy, NRG Energy, Shell, and the University of Houston. And this year we established the equity program to really improve clean transportation and increase EV adoption in an equitable way in Houston. So just at a high level, the eMobility microgrants are the way that we are choosing to advance equity and apply funding to these historically underserved neighborhoods in Houston who may have been previously left out of transportation planning in the past. And we're looking to award microgrants up to $15,000 per project proposal in partnership with our corporate catalysts and community champions to local electromobility or e-mobility projects in the greater Houston area. So again, just at a high level, we'll touch on all of this throughout the presentation, but our corporate catalysts, GM and BP, have contributed funding to the program, which we're going to use to fund those microgrants. And that application is going to be open until next Friday at 6 p.m. So that's September 16th. And then we'll have community champions review those applications through the 27th. And we'll notify everyone who applied, whether or not they received the award and the award amount by November 3rd. So diving into the eligibility requirements, generally the application is pretty much open to everyone in the greater Houston area, but there are some things that are going to determine whether or not your project proposal has a higher priority in the review process. So looking into that, we have the applicant types, which are individuals, private organizations, nonprofits, collectives, and community-led groups. And like I said, the application is pretty much open to everyone, but we are going to be looking at the execution risk and project governance when we're looking at reviewing these applications, or I should say the community champions will be looking at that while they're reviewing the applications. So we have encouraged individuals and for-profit organizations to apply with a fiscal agent or a fiscal sponsor. And what that really means is just getting a nonprofit to sign on with you as you're applying for your project proposal. And just to say, we're working with, X organization to implement, these project goals. And there'll be a section on the application where you can say that you have a fiscal sponsor as a part of that application. Let's see. Okay, so the geography of the eligibility requirements is really the greater Houston area, but there is a priority on Houston complete communities, as well as historically disadvantaged communities through the U.S. Department of Transportation. And like I said, we'll be sending out this presentation and the recording afterwards, so you'll be able to click into those links. But Houston's complete communities are the communities in Houston that Mayor Turner and the City of Houston have defined as some of the most historically underserved communities in Houston who will benefit the most from additional funding in terms of that equitable distribution of opportunities and resources. So we're hoping to put out a lot of funds toward the Houston Complete Communities, as well as any historically disadvantaged community in Houston. And you can check out those areas on the Department of Transportation website, which it is linked on the slide. And you can kind of see what both of those areas look like on this slide. And then diving into the focus areas, these are the main focus areas for projects that we're looking to fund through the Microgrant initiative. So there's 3 main focus areas, and within each of these, you might have some overlapping goals, overlapping, steps that all kind of achieve all 3, or maybe you're just looking at one. But these areas are increasing access to and awareness of all forms of eMobility and EV infrastructure. So that can look at raising awareness or boosting affordability, accessibility, maybe increasing efficiency or reliability of existing transportation options. And those are kind of the indicators within that below each of these main focus areas. The second focus area is reducing greenhouse gas emissions from transportation sources. And, if you're looking to improve access, you're probably also going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions as a result. So that's looking at decreased air pollution, improved health impacts, as well as decreased vehicle miles traveled, all which contribute to overall greenhouse gas emissions. And the final focus area is expanding economic opportunities. So that can look like workforce development to support transportation electrification. It can be increased connectivity to places of employment, education, health, parks, pretty much any increased connection to the places that we all need to go. And finally, looking at local business and economic activities that really just improve the economic standing of any community or residents within that community. And this slide kind of covers some of the funding support that may be eligible to receive microgrant funds. On the left, you can see a list of eligible expenditures, which cover a lot. And then on the right, there's a list of ineligible expenditures, which is pretty standard for most grant applications. So we won't cover damages by insurance or legal settlements. And this is all in the microgrant guidelines as well. But that's pretty much a high level of the things that we're looking to fund within each of these proposals. And then moving on to the evaluation criteria, there are 5 different categories the community champions will be looking at to evaluate these applications. So those are all listed out on this slide. So I'll go through each of these in a little bit more detail just to make sure everyone has a good understanding of what a strong grant proposal would look like. So that first one is mission match, which really just means an alignment between your project's goals and those focus areas that we touched on earlier. So that's, improving access and awareness to EVs and EV infrastructure, expanding workforce development, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions from transportation. And then within the application, you'll have an opportunity to list out, your goals and the steps you'll take to achieve that. So that's kind of where you would tie that mission match to those focus areas. The second thing that community champions are going to look at to review and rank these applications will be the execution risk. And that kind of ties into your ability to actually implement the proposed project and, your desire or ability to collaborate with not only Evolve, but also just, other members and other organizations within the community. We really want to make sure that the microgrant funding actually has an impact. And with smaller grant funding, there's an opportunity to apply for more in other areas. So we want to make sure that these projects have an impact. And then the third thing that community champions are going to be looking at is that connection to the community. We really want to fund local eMobility projects. So that's, people who have, or organizations who have, greater ties to the community. We really want to prioritize those over, some who may come in and have a great idea. So really just looking at like, what is that connection to the community's air quality and mobility needs, really tying in those goals of the proposal and the steps that you'll take to achieve that, with needs that the community actually needs to be addressed. The fourth thing that community champions will be looking at to evaluate these projects are the tie between the goals of the proposal and the ability to execute once the microgrant funds have been received. And that kind of ties into the execution risk and what I was touching on earlier about, once these projects receive funding, we want to make sure that the impacts that, and the goals that these projects are hoping to fulfill are actually making an impact on residents' lives within the greater Houston area. And that touches on, the final focus area for evaluation, which is just the geographic focus. And that's just, we want this money to go to communities in Houston. So that means those project proposals and those transportation projects that fall outside of the 9-county region of Houston will not be considered for this application. So those are going to be the 5 signs of a strong grant proposal. Those will be the 5 categories of criteria that community champions will be looking at to evaluate this grant application. And then moving to the application process and the awards and requirements, we'll start by touching on the actual application process itself. So that's apply.evolvehouston.org. And you'll be prompted to create a submittable account, which is the platform we're using to facilitate the application and review. You can sign on through Google, or you can create an account through Submittable. But that's how you'll actually submit an application. And we do have this in the grant guidelines, but if for some reason you can't submit a digital application, you can reach out to equity@evolvehouston.org to ask, for a paper application or any other application assistance. But this link through Submittable has the project guidelines, the microgrant guidelines, as well as the actual application questions that you'll use to go through. And on Submittable, you have the option to save your draft or go ahead and submit. And you can use that to, save if you want to come back. You can invite project partners, and within that platform as well, if you need any technical help, you can press the help button on the screen, and you can get that technical help. And like I said, if you have application questions or need help of the not technical sort, you can reach out to equity@evolvehouston.org. So moving to the application review process, I touched on this on those first couple of slides, but it has 3 steps to review applications. So first, we'll do a brief eligibility review, and that will look at applications. We'll look at the applications just based on, like, is this transportation focused, and is this in Houston? And if both of those things are true, that'll be forwarded to the community champion review panel. And I do see a question from Mark. Is there a is there a company valuation limit, or is this focused towards startups? We do want to focus on startups and smaller companies. However, there is no limit to how much, or there's no company valuation limit to these projects, as long as the project is focused on serving those mobility needs of historically underserved communities. So with that being said, we will fund microgrants for any of those eligible applicants, like I said, for profits, nonprofits, individuals, collectives, etc. But it's really in the hands of the community champions to determine whether or not that particular application or that particular proposal should be ranked more highly above some of the other project proposals. And I also see a question from Thelma. Is Greenpoint outside of Houston? The address is Houston. I am not aware of where Greenpoint is, but if the address is a Houston address, then it should be applicable. And we can definitely follow up with you after the information session to look at that geographic area as well, because like I said, I'm not familiar with it. Okay. So looking at step 2, this is the community champion panel review. As a side note, we are currently recruiting community champions, and those are people who live and work in the communities we're hoping to serve with the microgrants. So that's, Houston Complete Communities and other communities experiencing transportation challenges in Houston. And we do have an interest form if you're interested in nominating yourself or someone else to sit on that panel, because the community champions are going to be the primary reviewers of the application. And they'll sit down and they'll review these applications based on those criteria that I listed before. And they will be responsible for kind of scoring those applications, which will kind of generate a total ranking, which is when we'll forward those suggestions to the steering committee. So the community champions will individually look at these applications. We'll come together as a group once or twice, ending with this final review panel session to kind of discuss the applications overall. And once we kind of get all on the same page about, what looks like a good grant application, what doesn't look like a good grant application, then we'll forward that to the steering committee. So let's see, Stephanie asked a question: are organizations disqualified if someone from that organization is a community champion? So the answer to that is an organization isn't necessarily disqualified. However, we are going to be we're going to be asking community champions or potential community champions to fill out a conflict of interest form. So with that, we will be sending that out to the people who fill out that interest form or that nomination form. And we are only looking to have about 10 to 12 community champions. And if there are a significant number of conflicts of interest, for that particular community champion, then we'll probably look to someone else to fill that role. But it's really going to depend on, what project proposals come in and who is looking to apply to become a community champion. I'm going to pause just for another second. Also, if anyone has any other questions about the community champions, just put those through the chat. I know Mary just asked about the one pager, and we do have that, and we can share that with y'all. Let's see. So that should be up. Okay, So, like I said, once the community champions have done their initial reviews and our group review, they'll forward those recommendations, those rankings to the steering committee. And the steering committee will break down those recommendations, resolve any questions that there may be between the community champions about these applications, and actually line out those microgrant funding allocations as the final step in the review process. So with the awards and the requirements for those awards, we're looking to fund up to $15K per project, depending on the anticipated budget and the project needs. And we're looking to award those or notify all of the potential awardees and all of the applicants of their award status by November 3rd. And following that, we'll be having we'll have an event gathering just to honor all the people who, came through and got an award, and really like start building those connections moving forward, which speaks to those requirements that is on the right side of the screen. So we don't want to put a ton of barriers when it comes to tracking your project in advance. But once we make those connections and start putting out that process to award the microgrant funds, we want to work together with the awardees to track the project implementation after we start the awards process. And throughout 2023, we'll be asking all of the grantees to designate a representative to join a listening and learning or a working session in 2023. The cadence of those meetings has not been set yet. However, we're kind of thinking something along the lines of a meeting every month or every other month, just to kind of keep those connections going, see how the project is going, see how the residents are benefiting. Are there any other opportunities for further funding? What are the next steps? What are the challenges? Things like that. And those will all be in 2023, which we'll be following up on, with all of the awardees after we've distributed the microgrant funds. So this slide has all of the key dates that you need to know regarding the microgrants. And our applications have been open since August, and they'll be closing September 16th at 6 p.m. This is one of the information sessions we've had for that. And then let's see. I see a question from Anoop. When does the work need to be completed by? Funding used by? We have not set those requirements ahead of determining, the allocation for the microgrant funding. So, I think in general, probably a year or so, just because the funds are microgrant funds. So it's not a. Yeah, so the funds are microgrants, so there's no set timeline for us. However, when you're filling out an application, we would like to see a timeline and next steps for implementing your project proposal. But we'll work with each individual project awardee to determine what's realistic and what's feasible for tracking those goals that you set up at the beginning of your project. So applications are due September 16th, which is next Friday. And that following Monday, that will kick off that application review process that we touched on. So the Evolve team will look at those applications for eligibility, which really just means, is it clean transportation focused? And is that targeting residents in the Houston area? Then we'll forward those to the community champions, who will individually review and then come together as a group to review. And then they'll forward those recommendations to the steering committee. So that should all be finalized by the end of October. And awardees will be notified by November 3rd for the status of their grant application. And like I touched on earlier, we'll have a small event to kind of kick off that listening and learning working sessions for the new year, and really start establishing those connections up front. So this page has all of the main links and resources you'll need to complete the microgrant application. So the application link through Submittable is online at apply.evolvehouston.org. And you can check out our website to look at all of the main aspects of the program. So that's our corporate catalysts, our community champions, and the actual applicants to the microgrant application. And you should be redirected to that page actually after the information session is over. But you can also just find that through the search bar on our website or the menu bar on our website. And then, like I touched on earlier, we do have an interest form for community champions out right now. And we put that in the chat a little bit earlier, but you can also access that on the information page, as well as these slides once we send those all out. And you can email equity@evolvehouston.org for any other questions that may come up after the information session. So I know that was quick. It was a lot of information all at once. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. All right, so the question from Jake is, are there any resources to connect us with a nonprofit sponsor? So we don't currently have any resources on the website for nonprofit sponsors. However, we do work with several organizations in the transportation space. And if you want to email equity@evolvehouston.org, just with like a high level overview of your project and what you're hoping to accomplish, then we can work with you to kind of facilitate that process and see if there's anyone we know of in our network to work with you as a fiscal sponsor. So as you guys might be thinking about any questions, and I saw Anoop's question come in, so I'll address that momentarily. But we are right now really focusing on promotions for the microgrant opportunity. So if you or your organization has anyone you'd like to share this with, we do have a media kit available. So you can use the copy within that document. It should be popping up somewhere on your screen. But there's copy for your newsletter, as well as emails to kind of your internal closer network and your external network. If you have an email list that goes beyond, just a newsletter blurb. And we also have copy for social media within that. Like I said, we really want to promote this opportunity to residents in Houston, and anyone with ideas, because we want to make sure that everyone is aware of this funding opportunity and can really take advantage of that while the applications are open. So definitely download that media kit and share with your network. And then looking at Anoop's question, can you share an example of a proposal that makes sense or is ideal? I'm trying to understand what works. So the proposals are very open. But there are several things that would work. Anything that would look to improve mobility, and that looks at, not only electric vehicles, but also, smaller electric vehicles or micro mobility. So if you have an idea for, bike sharing or scooters or something like that, we really want to keep it open. And if you have, further questions or clarifications as you're going through that application on the submittable platform, you can definitely reach out to equity@evolvehouston.org, and we can kind of touch on those focus areas to help further clarify what would make sense. But really, the application, the proposals are very open, because at Evolve, we have, some idea of an understanding of what challenges communities may be facing. However, we really want to source these ideas, these solutions to community mobility challenges through communities, which you can touch on in your microgrant proposal. But yeah, definitely refer to the microgrant guidelines for that, and feel free to reach out with any further questions. So Anoop has another question. Can you disclose the total pot of funding available? Thanks in advance for answering my questions. Of course, Anoop, we do not mind at all. That is what we're here for. So right now, the amount of funding is up in the air, because we are still working on recruiting corporate catalysts. But after the program, we will be, or after the applications have been taken in and everything's been reviewed and the whole microgrant process has been followed up on, we will be disclosing the amount of funding that each project has received, and that'll be coming in the new year at some point. Alrighty, well, if no one has any more questions, then I think we are good to wrap up the session a little bit early. We will be sending out this recording as well as the slides after the session is over. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and feel free to reach out to me or the equity email that's, I think I've said at least 4 times. But yeah, everyone, thanks so much for joining, and looking forward to hearing from you soon.